We are now streaming, and at 7:31, we'll call to order this regular meeting with budget workshop of the Reading Board of Education for Tuesday, February 2nd, 2021 at 7:30 p.m., being held remotely pursuant to Executive Order 7B. All members of the board, with the exception of Mr. Hoffman, are present. The first order of business is the approval of minutes from the January 5th, 7th, and 14th meetings. Do I have a motion to approve all three of those sets of minutes?
I'll make that motion.
John, is there a second?
Second.
Heather, are there any comments on any of the minutes? If there are no comments or concerns about the minutes, they'll be deemed approved by unanimous consent, and we'll move on to public comment. Members of the public wishing to comment, please raise your hand in the participants window or with the reaction button, or otherwise turn your video on and wave at us. Seeing none, board member comment? Heather?
Sorry. I want to thank Dr. Harrison for all the time and talent he put into his video that went viral. And I'm pretty sure that ER9 has not been featured on both Good Morning America and CBS this morning on the same day. And to quote WFSB, everyone knows he is the coolest superintendent out there. Dr. Harrison enthusiastically joined our school community in the middle of our most difficult year, bringing with him a much needed perspective and the skill set necessary to foster increasing excellence in Reading schools. And I have found Dr. Harrison to be professional, knowledgeable, respectful, considerate, kind, and patient in all of my interactions with him. And I cannot overstate both what an asset he is to our school, and I look forward to his continued leadership. And don't you ever underestimate what a theater major can bring.
Hear, hear.
And Heather would have said that even if Gail King didn't talk about Rydell today.
Yeah, that wasn't performative in case she's listening.
Any other board member comment? Chris?
I'm afraid I have to question Rydell's judgment about that video. I mean, Justin Timberlake, really? I mean, come on. How are you going to engage my generation with Justin Timberlake? Seriously, I thought it was great. I've been hearing about it from colleagues and people all over. So it really, talk about the right time and the right place. Totally endorse.
Thank you.
Any other board member comments? All right. If there's not Assistant Superintendent's report, Dr. Pearson-Ugal?
I think it's going to be hard to follow that, other than to say that the video was also a big hit in my home as well, with a little one trying to figure out how there could be so many of him. And he had so many friends who looked just like him with different hats on all at the same time. So thank you for that excitement that you brought to all of our homes. My comment to the board is just that my eye continues to be on our curriculum and the needs of our students as we are about halfway through a most challenging year for all. And as we get further into our budget conversations, I just want us all to keep in mind, not to be a damper on an otherwise positive few moments, that the year again is only half over. And so while the first months we were cautiously optimistic about how our students were tracking and their progress and gains, we are very aware that those needs continue to ebb and flow, both in terms of their academic and social emotional needs. And so as we plan for classes and think about class size, social emotional learning, as well as academic learning, just know that we have weekly conversations about our students and how they are faring on informal as well as more formal assessments. And so I ask us all just to keep that in mind in terms of the board members and also the community as we engage in our conversations and make decisions about budget.
Thank you, Stephanie. And as we move towards the next few weeks, where hopefully we all keep all the students in for, God willing, the rest of the school year, to the extent we pick up on any trends or deficits and there is action or resources the board can take to help get ahead of some of those deficits before the end of this year, please don't hesitate to bring those to our attention.
Thank you.
Building administrative reports. We can start with Ms. Hammond at RES.
Hello, everybody. So the last couple of weeks have brought quite a bit of excitement back into our building, and the building is full. It's full of life. Our teachers have just been knocking it out of the park. It's so good to see the children back. In this month's report, you'll see a snapshot from each grade level to give you a little picture of where the students are at. Yes, learning is happening, and happening in amazing ways. Our teachers are still connecting with those families who have opted for the temporary learning from home option. We are just, Joe and I on a daily basis keep our fingers crossed that we are going to stay healthy and together and as a whole building as we move forward. We thank our families very much for being open and communicative with us. That is absolutely imperative at this time. Even if children are needing to stay home, the learning will still happen. We will still be providing that for our youngsters. One plug I just want to make sure to give, clearly with the unbelievable amount of snow we got yesterday, and our need, one of our mitigating measures throughout this year is our cohorting, both in the classroom, as you know, but also at lunch and at recess. And so recess being this, as you know, we have a massive field out back, but now that massive field is covered by a ton of snow, which is wonderful because our PE classes get to go out and do cross-country skiing, which I have never heard of at an elementary school before. And I think it's super duper awesome that we can do it at RES. But between that and also needing to cohort our classes while they're outside, we really, and I put it in my Tuesday Newsday today, we put it in our memo last Friday. Please, please, families, dress your children so they can go in the snow. We will do our best each and every day to get children out. They need the fresh air. They need to be outside playing. But we also need to do it so that we are still cohorting. So for example, if there is a classroom that is cohorted on Wednesday for the blacktop, then it's not going to hurt them to have their snow pants and boots on. But that same class on the next day might be on field A. So it's really important for the group and the friends to be able to stay together. We obviously are not going to send little ones out into 1.5 feet of snow without the proper gear on, which would then take away that opportunity, because we can't just put them in any other cohort area, because then we're defeating the purpose of this very important mitigating measure that we are following in the building. So I don't mean to spend so much time talking about it, but I know a lot of families listen to this meeting. So just saying it again, we want to get kids outside. Help us. I know the kids come in with their 20,000 bags on their shoulders, but we will assist with that. We want to get them outside, but snow pants, boots, gloves, and appropriate jackets to go outside, so that if in the event that their cohort is in a snowy area, they can go and run around and enjoy being a kid with their classmates and friends. So thank you for that. I look forward, as Stephanie mentioned too, to us working as a team together, really thinking about our needs moving forward for next year as we truly enter the budget season at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. Can you give us a sense of what the percentage of students in cohort C is at this point? Just ballpark?
Probably about 15. Joe might be jumping in. About 15%, Joe?
Yeah, it's about 16%. I think it's close to, and it's changing daily, but it's around 70 students in our building.
Okay. Any questions in the RES report? Okay. If there are none, thank you, Natalie. We can move on to John Reed and Dr. Amori.
Hi, good evening, everyone. The first thing I want to share about these board reports, and I made a couple of people laugh, I think, if anyone's old enough to remember the dummy, Charlie McCarthy, I sometimes feel like I'm the Charlie McCarthy, because I want to share that this board report is put together for me for us really, every month by both Darlene Wallen and also our administrative assistant, Sue Dornbosch. And of course, I throw in a few things myself, but I do want to give a shout out to both of them because, and make a little joke about me just mouthing the words. I do also try to add somebody must remember who Charlie McCarthy is. Anyway, not too many.
You finally helped Mr. Hawker out tonight.
Well, that kind of balances out the Timberlake, right?
Exactly. Edgar Bergen and I were 2 years apart in high school.
There you go. Okay, there you go. So what Darlene will do is she'll send out an email to staff, what's going on in your class that I can share on the board report. And they are all too happy to brag about the special things that are going on. So I won't go through all of them, but you can see some of the really great stuff that's, going on in John Reed, both virtually and in person. I'm really proud of it. Tomorrow, it is World Read Aloud Day. And if you haven't seen it yet, we'll share the link. The slideshow put together by all of us, and we basically recommended books that we loved, either at that age or that we read to our children. I was going through it today before the board meeting. I just felt so proud to see so many people chime in and to say and to share with our students books that they really enjoyed and want them to have the same experiences. That's there. Let's see what else I want to share with you. The other thing that I'm really so pleased to share is that we have, and very quickly, again, I'll give a shout out to Sue and our teachers who got on board so quickly. You can see on our website, we have, we're back and running almost all of our extracurriculars. I mean, we can't do a play, obviously, but many of our other clubs and activities, including early morning gym and after school homework club, which by the way is actually quite popular with our students. They get their homework done, they get some extra help from the people who are on staff. We are going to begin those things actually this week and next once we get back in the building. So we've let parents know and students know to watch out for the announcements. And that's, as I think I mentioned during our last board meeting, that's what middle school is all about. Getting the students connected, especially as I thank Dr. Pearson-Ugel earlier for her comments. We're really concerned now about the social and emotional well-being of our students. Those who are at home, and many of our teachers have created opportunities for those at-home cohort C students to log in for these clubs. They can also sign up for them. So I'm really pleased that we are able to offer some of those opportunities for our students. So that would be what I wanted to highlight for tonight. And I will share, Chris, that the last time I looked, our cohort C was actually up and went up to almost 20%. We were just under 20% the last time. I haven't checked as of today, but if that is changed, I'll definitely update the board on that.
Yep, we're at about
that's basically
17 right now. We're at
okay.
17%
Right,
as of today.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Phyllis, any questions on the John Reed report?
This is Colleen. I have a question that actually stemmed from something I overheard or heard rather in the tri-board meeting. How much are the Wednesdays PD days, the half days, are those missed? And, so I want to balance between, of course, you'd want professional development. I'm not asking you to answer that question. I know the answer there, but, does the staff have a feeling in either school, this is for RES and DRMS, in either school, like, oh, if only we had that time continue, we would able to meet this need or something like that. Do you have that sense amongst your staff?
I will say, Colleen, and this is just a general answer, and it's a very broad answer that one of the, if there could be a critique of the American, public school system, it's that our teachers don't have as much time to meet as might be true in other nations. I mean, that's just kind of a truism among educational researchers. So teachers are always going to say, yeah, we'd like more time to collaborate with one another, to work on our own professional development. But, there's that's also balanced by a real understanding and need to keep up and to help our students continue to meet their academic standards. We have had a lot of time at home. So, it really is 6-1. I haven't had to balance that. I appreciate the question. But, we do have a few more days coming up, and built into the schedule, but I don't know that that I've heard 100%. Yeah, we definitely want those days back. So I defer to my colleague Natalie. What do you know from your teachers?
No, I absolutely hear what you're saying. But I do know through conversations with staff, they were unbelievably appreciated. And I think they have transitioned into where we are now, but it's not been without challenge, limiting that amount of time. And because we have had to change our schedules this year because of the cohorts, and Joe again did a masterful job at making sure that our lunch cohorts and our recess cohorts are smaller than a whole grade level like we used to do in the past. That limits that opportunity that Phyllis is mentioning, that limits that opportunity for teachers and teams of teachers to actually be together, to forward think and to plan ahead. So yes, they were greatly appreciated. I know it was tough losing those. And like Phyllis said, we're going to make the best of the times that we have coming forward. But I know that they were very grateful to have those days and those opportunities, because with the new schedule due to COVID and the changes we've had to make, that time together has been very limited.
Colleen, if I could just jump in and also add to that, just sort of building off of what Natalie and Phyllis both shared. I know that they're seeing and working with their teachers on a daily basis. My interactions with teachers, of course, is very different, but I have the opportunity of meeting with our Reading Educator Association, with the REA. And so in recent meetings with them, either with meeting with their executive board or sort of the larger membership, I met a couple of weeks ago with the entire staff at John Reed. One of the things that they continue to discuss is the challenge of time. And, I mean, I spent a lot of time in the classroom as a teacher. I can't imagine having to plan, for learning in two models when you have some kids who are temporarily learning from home and you have kids sitting in front of you, that it just takes a lot of time. And I think, to Phyllis and Natalie's point, there's the collaboration that's really needed. And then there's also just sort of the time with brainstorming new ideas, pulling together resources. I think another critical piece, though, that would be useful for that Wednesdays is, we continue to talk about opportunities for some personalized engagement for our students who are part of Cohort C. And really balancing the time. I know that Dr. Pearson-Ugel has done some work with our folks on, building in small groups and ways to approach that. But I think that, again, I think that time is such a valuable resource. And, while we transitioned away from those Wednesdays, there are a couple of neighboring districts that maintain those Wednesdays and have found it to be really helpful for their teachers. And so I've had some conversation with a couple of those superintendents just about what's the overall impact. Of course, we recognize that each to our schedule has a tremendous impact on our families and their work schedules. So we want to be conscious of that. But I do think that, just speaking on behalf of the teachers, I'm glad for you to bring it up. Those Wednesdays were really valuable. And I think that that's true for all of our K-8 teachers in both districts.
So if there is a need, if you decide there is a need, and there could be a very specific, solid plan created for how that time would be spent, I would be I would be as a board member very interested to consider that, so that we are spending the time that we have together with the students and the staff to the best of our ability.
Okay, I will work on that and share information back with the board.
For clarification, Dr. Harrison, with all three districts now moving towards being all in within a week or so, from a transportation perspective, would it be feasible for Reading to reinstitute PD days or partial days if the other districts did not?
That's a good question. because I'm not sure how that would impact the bus schedule. So I'd need some time to sort of work through that and just get a better picture.
I'm sorry, John, I think I cut you off.
No, it's okay. I'm kind of on topic, off topic here. We mentioned at the onset the percentage of students who are in cohort C, and we're talking about ways of cutting the schedule up. Are there a way, I guess, is there a way to have more time for teachers to interact with the cohort C students? And is that something that we should, be planning for, or already in the works and planning for, as that number seems to grow?
Yeah, that was definitely, John, thank you. That was definitely one of the things that our teachers were doing well during that Wednesday release time. Yeah. And during distance learning, when we had that hour or so at the end of the day. It's different. It's harder to do during the regular class. It just is. So having that concentrated time was really helpful.
I think that was all brought on by Colleen's question with respect to Dr. Amori's report. Any other questions on John Reed? All right. That brings us on to discussion and possible action. The first item is recharging of committees. And this is a topic that comes up with some frequency with respect to the large number of committees that the board and the tri-boards have, and the various levels of detail of various charges of different committees. And so what I've done to try to help manage the situation is I've drafted proposed charges for our core standing committees. I've circulated those to the board in advance of the meeting, and I'm going to share my screen now. And what I'd be looking to do is solicit feedback from the board with respect to any of these charges, and we can kind of go in order. And then ideally accept a motion to adopt those charges so that we can be up to date on the formal charges with respect to the Reading specific board committees. The first one being the curriculum committee, and you can tell me if I need to blow this up to see it any better. But you will find that all of the charges follow a very similar format that I have cribbed from the Region 9 format for how they have charged committees, with the goal being that Easton, Reading, and Region 9 can all start following a similar format for committee charges and bring some clarity to process.
Thanks for putting this together, Chris. Just looking, starting at the curriculum committee, are we intentionally, I assume, looking at up to 4 parents versus kind of setting an exact?
Correct. I didn't want to be in a situation where we had trouble filling the committee.
Right.
Which has been an on again, off again issue. So are there any proposed revisions to the curriculum committee charge? Is there a motion to adopt the curriculum committee charge?
I'll make that motion.
Heather, is there a second?
I'll second.
John, any further discussion with respect to the curriculum committee charge? If there is not, we'll call the question. Heather?
Yes.
Colleen?
Yes.
Steph?
Hold on. Yes.
John?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
I vote yes. Motion carries 6-0. Thank you. We can move on to facilities committee.
Can I ask a question, Chris, just to
Absolutely.
bring me up to speed, because I wasn't around for the genesis of some of these committees. So indulge me. Did none of the committees have a charge before now, or what?
About a month ago, I inquired of central office to provide me with all of the charges that existed for Reading committees so that we could update them and make sure we were all aware of what they were. I was advised that there was a charge for the DEI task force and the curriculum committee. So what I've done is I've taken the curriculum committee charge and I've revised it just to be in conformity with the rest, and drafted more or less from scratch charges for the other committees in accordance with my understanding of how they've operated historically. The only committee on the committee chart that is posted on the central office website that is not included here is the resources committee, because to my knowledge, as a 3-year member of the resources committee, it has never met and it's unclear what its future is. So I didn't sort of deign to draft a charge for a committee that's currently not operating.
And now are these committees, sorry about this, but might clarify for anybody else. Are these committees considered standing committees
That's my understanding.
that have to be both formally formed and presumably formally disbanded at some point?
Right. My understanding is they've all been formally formed, and at some point they must have been given some kind of a marching order, but that has been lost to time, to my understanding, which is why it makes sense to go through the steps of formally charging them, and to the extent we are recreating them.
All right. And I take it it's your feeling, and I assume other people's feelings, that all of the committees listed here are both appropriate and necessary?
I would think that any of them are open to discussion to the extent to which they are appropriate and necessary.
Okay,
I drafted
but, I mean,
charges based on the existing roster. Yeah.
One could approve the charge and then decide later to essentially moot the charge because the committee isn't functioning.
Right. Or we come to the conclusion that the work of the Ways of Working Committee has run its course and we're disbanding it. Basically, could be a reasonable decision.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
Chris, it's Colleen. Can I just clarify, is Mike Hoffman on the call?
He is not.
Okay. Is there any way we could hold off on the facilities committee until he was, isn't he our facilities person?
We certainly could.
I'd like him to weigh in.
Okay.
On that part. Unless I'm wrong, am I forgetting that somebody else who's here is our representative on the facilities committee?
Only if Mr. D'Agostino is here and Mr. Zachary, they're both members of the facilities
okay,
committee.
of course, yeah.
I think Mr. Hawker is the one on your actual board is voting, I think is the point. So though I'm on the committee, I'm not should be the one deciding whether you have the charge or not.
Yeah, I'm happy to pass on the facilities committee on Colleen's point.
Yeah, I don't know who the second member is, and if somebody thinks it's me,
right.
Send me an email, send me a text.
Right now, the only Reading board member on the facilities committee is Mr. Hoffman.
Okay.
And I think Mike D'Agostino has been the chair of the facilities committee probably since its inception a decade ago, and continues to be. So why don't we pass on facilities, then we can get feedback from both Mikes. The policy committee charge was intentionally narrowed because of the creation of the joint ER9 policy committee, but I think it still is important to maintain a policy committee for the purposes of policies that are relevant specifically to the Reading district. And so this charge is intended to state a purpose of working collaboratively while also maintaining the work that is necessary for Reading specifically.
Was it the intent to have the members of the ER9 committee be the same from Reading?
There's only one member of the, so then it becomes a committee of one. So.
And it's you, right, Chris?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so to make sure I understood you, this is a committee that, if and when needed, would consider policies that are specific to the Reading district.
Right.
Okay.
And we already
Which, to the extent that the joint committee continues to do its work and pull in a collaborative direction, should be a relatively rare event.
Right. So I mean, when I said specific, it's meaning exclusive to the Reading district.
Right.
Right. Okay.
And I think the most obvious example of what would be exclusive to the Reading district is board governance and bylaws, which are primarily creatures of the board's own governance decisions. that
Can I
section of the policy being left to the devices of the three boards individually.
Mhm.
So this is
So if there were a video policy, that would be, I'm kidding. Never.
music video, you mean?
Yeah, I mean,
Can I make a motion? Oh, sorry, Colleen, go ahead.
I'm sorry, just one other piece. So we're already not following the structure, right? Because we don't have two members.
Right, there is no charge. So right now, it's sort of the Wild West, to my understanding. So I'm trying to put some structure around this, which would involve appointing two people to this committee so that it is available to the extent that it's required to do anything.
I was going to move that we approve the charge as proposed for the Reading Policy Committee.
I'll second.
Thank you, Chris. Any further discussion? If there's not, calling the question, Heather,
Yes.
Colleen,
Yes.
Steph,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Chris.
Yes.
I vote yes, carries 6-0. The next standing committee is the Long Range Planning Committee.
Should I just go ahead and move to approve the?
Sure.
Yeah. And then we can discuss after. I move to approve this charge for the Long Range Planning Committee.
Second.
Thank you, Heather, and second, John. Any discussion on this draft? Dr. Harrison.
So just a question about, I don't believe that this committee has met since I've been in the district. And so just curious about how this committee has worked in the past. Is there so for instance, with the policy committee, there's the Reading Policy Committee, but really the three policy committees are working together right now, working on policies. Is the expectation with this committee, would it be long range planning specifically for Reading, or would it be a tri-district? And is that more about sort of strategic goals as far as like staffing and facilities and student enrollment, or kind of more kind of academically focused goals?
To answer the first part of the question, the historic nature of the committee has been, I would say, fits and starts. There was a period where the committee met to look at the question of declining enrollment, probably in the order of 5-ish years ago. The committee also met with some regularity about 3 years ago to try to get a strategic planning process off of the ground. The goal in recharging the committee would be to collaborate with your strategic planning objectives so that we could work in tandem to do what is necessary to move the Reading district forward from a strategic perspective.
Thank you for that clarification.
Further discussion on the draft charge. Hearing none and calling the question. Oh, Chris?
You have a sentence in here about what constitutes a quorum, but with only 3 people. Is that
Well, the
so you could have one board member and the superintendent constitute a quorum? Right?
correct.
Okay. I mean, whatever they do are going to be recommendations to the full board anyway. There's no.
Exactly. And
Yeah, okay. All right.
and the charge is written in an at least fashion so that if there were 3 or 4 board members involved, the threshold would move up anyway.
Right. Gotcha. Okay.
There's no further discussion. Calling the question, Heather,
Yes.
Colleen,
Yes.
Steph,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Chris.
Yes.
Thank you. I vote yes, carries 6-0. The next one is the Structure and Ways of Working Committee, which I think might be one that we can have a discussion about its overall purpose going forward, but this is designed to help direct the board with respect to its operations. I know that Colleen and I have met with respect to this committee over the past couple of years and tried to bring about new efficiencies and ways of working with respect to our meetings. And there are other areas where in which it could theoretically also provide recommendations.
Move to approve the charge for the structure and ways of working committee.
Thank you, Heather. Second,
I'll second.
John. Thank you. Any discussion on this charge? Colleen, do you have any thoughts as a standing member of the SWOW committee?
No, I think you've done a good job capturing it there.
There are no other questions or comments. Calling the question, Heather.
Yes.
Colleen.
Yes.
Steph.
Yes.
John.
Yes.
Chris.
Yes.
I vote yes. It carries 6-0. Last one is the Communications Committee.
I'll make the motion that we approve the charge for the Communications Committee as presented tonight.
Thank you, John.
A second.
Second, Heather. Thank you. Any questions or comments on this, particularly from Heather or Colleen as the
This is not our communication policy. It's just the charge, right?
correct?
Yeah.
This is the scope of work for the Communications Committee. If there are no questions or comments, calling the question, Heather,
Yes.
Colleen,
Yes.
Steph,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Chris.
Yes.
I vote yes. It carries 6-0. Thank you for that, and thank you for your patience walking through that. We are more up to date with committees than we have been. The next item on the agenda is pending legislation. And if we recall from the tri-board meeting last week, when we had our legislative delegation present, there were a handful of topics that were raised that I think were of interest to us as board members, and with respect to areas we might wish to take a formal position as a board. 3 of those include the legislation with respect to the expansion of open choice to include Danbury, legislation with respect to the excess cost reimbursement grant, and legislation with respect to amending FOI to make permanent the remote meeting potential under Executive Order 7B. And thinking back to 2 years ago, the board took formal action to take a position with respect to several pieces of litigation and topics. And I would invite the board to take similar action tonight with respect to those 3 areas of legislation, and empower the superintendent and myself to take appropriate action to submit commentary or testimony to the legislature with respect to any or all of these topics that are of import to Reading. And so I would welcome any or all of these motions on these topics or any other legislative issues that were raised last week or that you're otherwise aware of at this time.
I'll move that the Reading. Oh, go ahead, Heather.
No, you go ahead.
I'll move that the Reading Board of Education formally supports legislation expanding the open choice program to include Danbury, and authorizes the superintendent and chairperson to communicate this support to the Connecticut General Assembly.
Thank you, John. Is there a second?
Well, I'll second that. Would it be easier if we just did all 3 of them? No.
I just didn't know if there was going to be any device. Yeah.
I'll second that.
All right. So on the floor for discussion is the endorsement of the open choice expansion legislation by the Reading Board. Any comments on this, Chris?
Just as a point of clarification, mostly for the public, I think, that this does not require participation in open. It provides no roadmap to how many and when and all that stuff. It simply would support legislation that would authorize it so that it can actually be considered instead of just sort of talked about when there's nothing else to talk about. Right.
The first step in Reading accepting students from Danbury through the open choice program is the state allowing Danbury to participate in the open choice program. And once that is
Right.
enabled through
And
legislation.
And that's what this supports.
Correct. This,
Right.
this supports enabling legislation to allow Danbury to be an open choice participant.
Also, it should be noted that this would not, if we did do this, it wouldn't be this coming year.
Right. The soonest we'd be talking about accepting open choice students would be for July, August of 2022.
Right,
Into,
if we
into
decided
fiscal
to
23.
do that.
Right. If the legislation is passed and we
Right.
agree to accept open choice students. So.
This is Colleen. Dr. Harrison, do you want us to be making motions like this? You know, your name is in there and we're authorizing you. Do you feel good about this? Is this something you want from us?
So I appreciate that question, Colleen. I think that the Board of Education's ability to advocate in Hartford for the district, so regardless of what's on the screen, I think that this is an incredible use of board time and energy and resources. So I appreciate that the Reading Board is being very intentional about wanting to do that advocacy work on behalf of our students and on behalf of the district. To these things specifically, I did have some conversation with the chair about these particular areas, and I would stand behind all of them. I mean, I think that they are beneficial to our community in Reading as a school district, but I think that these are also areas that would be very much supported by districts across the state. One of the opportunities that I have as a superintendent is to serve on the board of directors for CAPS, the State Association for Superintendents. And these areas are also very much in line with the legislation that we as a superintendent body support as well. So thanks for the ask. And the easy answer, the short answer to your question is yes, absolutely.
I also would like to, just for the public listening, that there has been bipartisan support on this board for the open choice option.
Chris?
And I would like to further, this is kind of a follow-on to my original comment, which is some of us may have seen that Dr. Harrison was part of a forum, and this was advertised on Facebook. It was a forum about open choice as kind of a overall concept with Senator Haskell and somebody else, I can't remember, inviting the public to participate, you know, virtually. And the level of commentary about the about open choice was kind of depressing because nobody understands it and everyone jumps to conclusions that aren't there. So we need to be real. I mean, I'm all for this 100%, but we need to be real careful and prepared. And I don't know whether it's a communications committee issue or whatever it is, to explain carefully and repeatedly what open choice means, what the implications are in the budget, and all that kind of good stuff, instead of just saying, well, okay, we support open choice, you know, because there's going to be questions raised, I guarantee it.
I would suggest, as a member of the communications committee, that if this passes and we are considering this, that we have those listening sessions that we had, I think 2 years ago for ahead of the budget, that I thought were helpful in terms of just being able to have a conversation with the community in a less formal setting.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to get too far ahead. Legislation hasn't passed yet, so we may never get there.
We don't know if Danbury wants to send any kids.
Right.
So there's all kinds of questions, but I was surprised by how much of a kind of mini lightning rod this was simply because Rydell was part of a informational forum. And I would expect it again if this gets closer to reality.
No, I think the emphasis should be on listening for him, because I had a chance to listen into that last night with Dr. Kevin Smith and Wilton as well.
Okay.
And both superintendents were doing a great job of explaining what the program is, the pros and cons, and there were questions that were popping up in the chat that clearly the folks who were typing away weren't listening so well.
I've seen some of the online chatter on social media from other districts, and I have to agree, it's depressing.
And it's important to note that open choice has been a part of the Easton School District for a number of years. And so this is not a foreign concept to ER9. In fact, this would sort of unify the approach across the 3 districts, if it were enabled and if we were able to participate.
Well, it's not just Easton either, because those kids have typically gone on into Barlow.
Right.
So it's really, we're the outlier.
Right.
It's just a matter of which city. Yeah, okay.
And ultimately, Barlow could end up being a high school that has students from Reading, Easton, Danbury, and Bridgeport all attending.
Right.
Any other questions or comments on support of the enabling legislation for open choice expansion? If there is not, we'll call the question. Heather?
Yes.
Colleen?
Yes.
Steph?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
I vote yes, and the motion carries 6-0. Anybody like to make a motion with respect to excess cost reimbursement?
I'll move that the Reading Board of Education formally supports legislation reducing the excess cost reimbursement threshold and authorizes the superintendent and chairperson to communicate this support to the Connecticut General Assembly.
I'll second.
Thank you, John. Any discussion on this motion?
I think it might be helpful to give a 1-sentence explanation of what the issue is we're trying to solve.
You have the
Certainly, the excess cost reimbursement grant covers special education costs in excess of 4.5 times the net current expenditure per pupil in the district. And we're reimbursed typically at roughly 70% of that cost over 4.5 times. For a variety of reasons, our 4.5x number is high and results in a relatively small reimbursement on an annual basis per special education case, as it requires the threshold is over $100,000 per case for us. And there is legislation, a variety of flavors of legislation proposed by CAPS and other places to reduce the threshold to a lower number or to impose different kinds of caps to increase the amount that we would be reimbursed for special education costs effectively.
Can I try it in a more simple way?
You can try.
basically, we don't get as much money back because we're a smaller district.
What she said.
Clarence is ready to jump right now.
No comment.
Any other discussion? All right. Calling the question, Heather?
Yes.
Colleen?
Sorry, yes.
Steph?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
I vote yes. Motion carries 6-0. The last one on my list is with respect to making an amendment to the Freedom of Information Act, which would make permanent the remote meeting options of Executive Order 7B, which would basically say that even after COVID, when the public health emergency is over, it would be possible to convene purely remote meetings by a digital platform like Zoom that would be recorded and live streamed, as opposed to requiring a physical location for meetings. I would not expect this to be the norm of this or any board. However, There are circumstances where it is helpful for boards or committees when they have simple agendas to avoid the commute to central office or other places and convene electronically for governance work.
Am I on mute?
No.
I move that the Reading Board of Education formally supports legislation amending the Freedom of Information Act to make permanent the remote meeting options contained in Executive Order 7B and authorizes the superintendent and chairperson to communicate this support to the Connecticut General Assembly.
Thank you, John. Is there a second?
I would second that.
Thank you, Steph. Any discussion?
Just a question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I shouldn't take up the time, but just real quick. Wouldn't it be the case, or you tell me, that if our bylaws provided, for instance, for someone attending a meeting remotely by phone or whatever, would this state legislation be necessary?
Well, it's interesting. There's a distinction in as much as having somebody dial into the meeting and having everybody dial into the meeting.
Gotcha.
And there's a question
Yeah,
in
okay.
interpretation of what the FOI Act says right now or doesn't say.
Yeah. Okay, I got you. All right.
Yeah.
Makes sense. As well as access to the public for something like that.
You broke up a little, Chris.
Oh, it also facilitates access to the public.
Right. I mean, we have 49 folks on right now, and it's pretty rare to have 49 people at a Reading board meeting when we're all in person. So
During a snowstorm, what else is there to do?
I mean, if you ever go back and look at any of the old videos from the old meetings, you wouldn't, watching a video, be able to see what we were seeing on the smart board.
Mhm. All right. If there's no further discussion, we'll call the question on the FOI motion. Heather?
Yes.
Colleen?
Yes.
Steph?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
I vote yes. Motion carries 6-0. Are there any other comments with respect to pending legislation or other areas that anyone would wish the board to take a position on? If there are not, we will move on to 7C, which is vaccine status, which I put on the agenda primarily to help instruct the public as to what we're hearing and learning about status of vaccines with respect to school staff. And from what I understand, the governor has currently prioritized everybody over age 65 first, everybody between ages 65 and 75 next, and then essential workers, which ought to include school staff unless there's a reshuffling of the priorities. And that probably puts vaccinations in schools sometime into March. I don't know if Dr. Harrison or Dr. Pearson, you all want to comment on the latest from updates from DPH on that front, or if that's the latest.
Chris, I believe that you basically have the latest. We participate in weekly calls with DPH and also SDE on Tuesday mornings. Dr. Pearson, you covered that call this morning, and earlier today when we spoke, she essentially said it's sort of the same story as last week. Stephanie, I'll let you jump in if you want to add to that.
No, you just said it. They had no update to any acceleration to the timeline that's already been provided.
All right. Thank you both. And if folks listening wanted to advocate to help get our school staff vaccinated faster, it's lobbying the governor's office is basically the way to go. And that's who I've been encouraging everybody who contacts me to do is send an email, talk to your legislators, talk to the governor's office. And, he ultimately controls when the vaccine gets distributed to who. And I think everybody agrees that the sooner it gets into schools, the sooner everyone's going to feel more comfortable with the safety of in-person learning.
Chris, can I just add one piece just to that, for the sake of the community, and we've communicated this with the staff, we are all set as soon as we get the green light to upload our staff rosters into VAMS, which is the system that will email our staff members to set up the appointment. I know that there was some confusion as to how that was supposed to work with some other districts, but just wanted to assure the community that we are all set to go and ready to move forward when we're given the go-ahead.
Great, thank you. Any questions or comments from anybody with respect to vaccinations? All right. If there are not, we'll move on to item 7D, which is the 2021-2022 operating and capital budgets. And if you recall, when we last met in January, we had worked through to create a bit of an issues list with respect to a handful of items that were outstanding, including the central office budget, which remains an open issue until a special meeting on the 8th to hopefully bottom out on that. Among the issues include this question of middle school scheduling and the 5th grade teacher. But before we get into that, I do want to ask Mr. Zachary to help walk us through the revised budget format that was presented to the board this afternoon and help us kind of understand what we're looking at.
Mr. Parker, Christopher, you want the share to the screen because me walking through, they're not seeing what we're seeing. I want them, might be somewhat difficult, or I can share depending on.
What I gave you permission so you can share and walk us through.
Okay, let me pull up the document first. All right. So you all got an email today. What I'm going to share with you all is it's similar to what we did with Easton. As you know, we're in the middle of a platform change. So in order to facilitate the budget discussions, we have not finalized the full move over. So in order to facilitate the budget discussions, we produce a canned report out of eFinance Plus. You had another version of this that didn't have the detail. So knowing that you guys wanted some of the detail, we wanted to sort of show you how to sort of you work through this document. So this is page 1 of what you got, just so you can look at it. That blue line says 01 general fund. That's basically the operating budget. That's our fund 01. We have some grant accounts, doesn't really matter. The green line 23 will tell you the location. So in your case, it'll be John Reed is 23 and Reading Elementary is 24. So that's going to be sort of standard. The sort of pinkish line, that is the function code. That's sort of critical, particularly on the Excel version I gave you. Each one of the tabs in the Excel version corresponds to a function code. I know some of you like to drill down into the details. So on this particular page, we're just looking at the general fund, general instruction at John Reed. 111 is the account or object code. So what we're showing you here is 111. On the other documents, it showed you the account structure change we made. So 111 refers to general classroom instruction. So what this is showing you is all the classroom FTEs and salary costs that go into 111 at John Reed. So it gives you, the previous version I gave you just had a total amount, so you couldn't see what comprised that. So this gives you the detail of whether it's a new position or a reinstate. So if you look at that 0.5 FTE music teacher, it says reinstate. That means it's not in this year's current budget, but reinstated because it had been in previous budgets, if that's clear. If it says new, it means it's brand new, never been in the budget and proposed. So that 1.0 grade 5 teacher would be a new position. So we're trying to make a distinction between something that's new and never been in the budget for, or being reinstated means something that was previously there that it got eliminated, and now the building administration is asking to restore it. Does that make sense? All right, so as you scroll down, you get all the sort of detail on how many FTEs, what type of role they have. So one thing you'll note, non-certified salaries, these account or object code designations, we added quite a few of those, which I'll show you in another chart. So I provided you with a mapping so you can sort of follow along where we were in our old platform of Phoenix to our new platform, eFinance. So the mapping will hopefully make it sort of clear to you. Previously in 111, we had every certified salary. So that'd be a teacher, a psychologist, a social worker, the building principal. This is all lumped into one group. And in order to make it more transparent, we sort of broke that out so you can see, get a better idea of what the individual costs are. So I'm going to move ahead to something so you can see what I'm referring to. Pardon me while I scroll through this. Let's see, quicker to do it this way. Special ed would probably be the best example of this. So let me get to special ed. Because there's generally always a good discussion about special ed. So in special ed, we had this version shows the old way, and the new version, which we just got it done today, so you don't have it. It'll be broken out to sped salary teachers. So I gave you this one. This is from January 7th before our breakout, but in order to get it out to you today, I wanted it so you can see it. Then you will have a separate breakout for psychologists. And if you follow the map I provided, you'll sort of see that 111 basically gets split off into different groups. You have sped teachers, sped paras, psychologists, social workers, OT, PT therapists, and all these various categories. So the way you follow this report, and this will tie back to what I gave you originally, is these various positions and the details there. We're now at a stage, if not tonight, tomorrow, we'll be able to have all the mapping updated within both systems. So we'll be able to give you historical information. This information you see here is straight from eFinance, has no historical information beyond that baseline number when you see the adjusted prior year budget. We're trying to get so you can see both historical and current year, so you can sort of compare what happened last year to what happened this year. We had a meeting today where we were working that with our software vendor to try to get that reconciled. And we were done with that, but then when we added the new account codes, I sort of moved the goalpost on him. He thought it was done when I added new account codes. He had to go do that. So that we took care of today. We're hoping to get out to you sometime tomorrow, if possible. So let me stop that share and share one more thing so you make sure you can grasp it here. Bear with me. There we go. This may be hard to see just because of small print, so let me blow it up a little bit. All right, so what we're seeing here, this is our mapping. So if you see these things in, I'll call it a salmon color, these are the new account codes. And you'll see it says eFinance object codes or account codes, their descriptions, and then what the equivalent thing was in Phoenix, our old system. So that's why, remember I told you 111 used to have all these different things in it. So we now have an administration salary code. We have a SPED administration salary code. We have pre-K teachers. We've sort of disaggregated to the point where you can really drill down. In the past, all these things were under 111. So one of the issues we're doing is, in order to show the history, we've got to sort of have those new codes flow back to the old code. And so it's sort of apples to apples, so it makes it easier for you to read. So I sent this all to you today. So if you have questions about how the mapping goes, this will be a guide, I think a helpful guide. So you have our new codes, which would be the eFinance object codes. Phoenix is our old system. Anything in the salmon color is a new account. The blue you can disregard. That was just our tracking to see where we had some questions in our final mapping. But the main focus for you all should probably be these new accounts in pink and where they map to in the old Phoenix system. And when we give you our new report, you should be able to see what we did in this sort of count 2 years ago, 3 years ago, or just last year. Before I go any further, any questions?
This is good stuff.
Well, we apologize. It's taken some time, but we're as I've used the analogy, we're changing from an analog navigational system while we're flying a plane to a digital system, and it's taken us some time. But once we get through this, by next year it'll be a lot easier. But we're sort of building it as we're flying, so we're getting there. So we gave you the information today just so you can have some stuff to review before Thursday. We should have some more information before Thursday, but we didn't want to waste your days of being able to review stuff. So I had a conversation with Chris earlier today about just getting something out so you have something to review. 2 changes we made as of today, which is not reflecting what we sent you, is the assumptions about the healthcare cost and the new Bridges program. We got that in today, but it's not reflected in the numbers you have there. So by Thursday, we should have that into something that you can review. But I do have those, what the additional costs are for those if you want me to just verbally give it to you.
That would be helpful.
All right, so let me stop here.
Before you do that, just so I understand. So this new system provides more specificity instead of, I mean, kind of instant specificity, so that we don't have to ask you so many questions, right?
Yes, it's not so much the system. It was the decision. I made an assumption when I got here that you had this sort of object level detail. When I found out you didn't,
Right.
I midstream said, we've got to work out this this account structure so we can have that, which sort of threw everyone off, like, because this was supposed to be rolled out July 1, but since it got pushed back because of COVID, I said, well, since we're rolling out now, let's make the change now. It's going to be somewhat painful now, but once we're done with this, it'll be a lot more transparent about where the money's going.
Right, because that was a drawback of the way it used to be presented, is that everything got lumped into one, and 1100 is a good example.
Yeah.
And you didn't know what the moving pieces were unless you asked the question.
Correct. So
there was this sort of back and forth. Well, what about this? What about that? This will make it hopefully that much easier, if not maybe not on the eyes, but on the brain. So
not that I don't enjoy talking to you all, but those sort of questions I am definitely trying to avoid.
Okay, I take the hint.
Okay, so we're talking about on the in our discussions today with Chris about the health insurance. We assumed a two-stop loss as a worst case scenario. So that works out to, based on the information that you were provided last week from Brown & Brown, I'm rounding here, that's about a $3.3 million budget. So the increase over this year from that number is a 21.5% increase, and it's $590,000 and 590,054. So 590,054 of an increase if you assume the two-stop loss. If you just, I also, that's what we put in the model, but just in case you want to know, the one-stop loss is a 15.13 increase for 415,054. So it's either going to be a 590 increase or a 415 increase, depending on what stop loss you all decide. Or if you decide to keep it flat, then that's another, but that goes back to the conversation we had in the tri-board meeting about your risk profile. And right now, Reading is trending the worst out of the three groups. So I would definitely recommend you consider the two-stop loss based on your current history.
What was the, Clarence, this is Colleen, what was the percent increase for the one-stop loss?
15.13 for a total increase of 415,054 for one-stop loss.
Which option are you going to plug into our numbers?
Based on Chris's recommendation, I put in the two-stop loss as a worst-case scenario. So if you back off, you'll be reducing where, if I put in one stop and you just have two stop, it'll be an increase. So we put the worst-case scenario of two-stop loss in the budget today.
Now, all right, but I'm assuming, I mean, what is the base off of which you take the 15 or the 21% increase?
This year's budget, we've got a budget about 2.7 million and change. So that's where the change, the delta is off that 2.7 from this year's budget.
Right, but I guess I should have asked the question better. Does it assume the additional staff members that are being requested?
Yes. So when we put in, we put in when originally it wasn't, because it was flatline. So when we're putting in now, this number does assume the additional staff members, including the bridges. Yes.
Okay, so that the percentage could be the same, but if you have a smaller group of staff, the number would be different.
Correct.
Would be lower. Okay, just clarity. Okay.
So that is the health insurance. Let me think. I showed the accounting code, and just so you know, in regards to the bridges program, the teacher for the program is an additional salary of $68,399 is what we put in the budget. And then the additional para, let me see here. Bear with me. The additional para is $16,875 in the budget, and that's assuming $15 an hour and 6.25 hours per day. So So that would be those would be the two figures for staff for the Bridges program you guys asked to add.
But in broad strokes, we're looking at, with 2 stop losses and the Bridges program, about 675,000 above where the number on the
Yes.
additional numbers.
Yes. And so by Thursday, we should have this, ready to present you in the budget. But as you know, Chris, we were on the phone today dealing with that. So we got it in. We made that call on the 2 stop loss. And if we make some changes about from 2 to 1, that'll be easy to do now that we have at least a working number to deal with.
Anybody have any questions or comments or requests of Clarence with respect to the documents we've received and are going to receive?
Will there be additional changes to the overall special education costs based on the Bridges program?
I may want to defer to Jen on that, because if you do it, it won't be, there'll be cost avoidance. So it means it's not in the budget. You avoid some costs, and Jen, back me if I'm saying that incorrectly. So if you do the Bridges program, you avoid some costs, and that as a cost avoidance, you need that's a real tangible thing to me, but it's not in the budget.
That is absolutely correct. If we do not have the Bridge program, we would actually be looking to outplace more students.
Right. Well, that was my understanding, and where I have some lack of clarity, which you don't have to get in now because the numbers aren't all gel, is to understand how to capture the cost avoidance.
Chris,
in other words, the last thing, my understanding is the last thing we're doing is taking the special ed budget and then layering on Bridges. Okay, that's not what we're doing, but that needs to be explained, understood, all that stuff, rather than, because otherwise it looks like, oh, we just hired another special ed teacher and a para.
Chris, our hope is to, in Thursday's meeting, go into detail about the cost avoidance. Is that we the sort of forum for that sort of detailed conversation?
Super. Okay.
But I agree 100%, Chris, that the communication of this is going to be important, because it does look on paper as if, oh, we've just added a new program.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Chairman, you have added a new program, but if you're adding a new program to avoid costs, and then we have to be, to your point, clear and transparent about that, because if you don't, these costs will be there, and by doing it, you can avoid the costs.
Right. Our choice is
critical.
Spend $100,000 in build capacity, or spend $400,000 and don't build capacity. And
correct.
Also, if it could include like the just something about the projected future savings beyond next year that we discussed.
Understood. We will. I'll make sure I circle back with Jen that we have that incorporated into base because her projection about new needs beyond next year. So base needs to ask her based on the younger grades, what she sees coming into the pipeline.
This strikes me as similar to moving the health insurance over to the high deductible, in that we're bending a cost curve down through cost avoidance.
That would be an accurate analogy.
Oh, but also creating the opportunity to take in students who would be paying tuition, right?
Yes.
That is correct.
Well, and not to sound too, airy-fairy about the whole thing, but we're also trying to do a better job serving the kids.
Yeah.
I think our position is if you could serve the needs of the children in Reading versus putting them on a bus somewhere else, that's in the best interest of the kids. So if we can find a way to provide those services, it's incumbent upon us to find a way to do it.
It's a no-brainer program from a cost perspective, from a keeping kids in the district perspective. The reality is that it's going to be expensive either way, and this is the cheaper and better option for our students.
It's a win, 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 win.
And when this is Colleen, when we talk about the addition of the teacher and the para, there were other details on that slide that you presented with the shift to the Bridges program, like changes in transportation. And I think there were still some students that might still need to be outplaced, even if we added bridges. So that whole, all the information on that slide will be added to the budget.
Yes.
Question mark. Yes. Okay.
Yep.
Other areas of questions or comments with respect to the eFinance Plus report or other deliverables on where we're at in the budget right now? If there are not, I think, thank you, Clarence. We'll look forward to the additional documentation as we kind of zero in on the final budget document that we can start working off of. And in addition, in talking to Dr. Harrison, I think we're going to spend some time on Thursday also getting a sense of his priorities with respect to programs in other areas that we can reduce by my math, adding the health insurance recommendation and the bridges program puts the budget at roughly an 8.4% increase. So we have some considerable work to do. But, as we said in January, this is a collaborative process between a new administration and the board to find mutual priorities and mutual reductions that get us into a much more comfortable place. So Dr. Harrison has promised some of that to come on Thursday, which we will look forward to. In advance of that, one of the topics that I know was on our issues list and that is caused some questions I've received and is some complications is the question with respect to the staffing levels at the middle school and the 5th grade team and the request for a 5th grade teacher. And Dr. Amori had circulated to the board a example of how the teaming structure works with and without the teacher. And so I would ask her to give us a few minutes to give a little more context on the request.
Thanks, Chris. Actually, I'm going to have Darlene do that since she created
Sure.
both of those documents for you. And if you could share that on your screen, are you able to do that?
Darlene, do you want to share or do you want me to share? I can give you permission if you'd like.
You could share because I have it on my other computer.
Okay. Let me call it up. All right, and I'm going to make that bigger.
Yep. Thank
That
you.
good? Is that good for everybody?
Yeah. Okay. Just to start with, we're talking about 5 sections of students, just as they have currently in 4th grade. So each section is a color. So I tried to make it so that you could see how the kids would follow through by color. Currently, we have 4 teachers, and they're listed at the top: Donnelly, Steves, Rimkunis, and Muscarell. What we're looking at is making sure that they have a full schedule, but within that, they cannot teach every section. If we had a new teacher, wait, I'm just trying to say which one. Okay, you have with the new teacher. The new teacher would be teaching math, for example, math to the pink group of students. ILA to the green group of students, advisory to the red group, and I think the green group, I think something got dropped off there. So
advisory for green.
Yeah. So, there it is. Thank you. So they would have some of those assignments. Not definite, but that was one way to take a look at this. They would definitely pick up the extra math and language arts class. What complicates 5th grade is they have the math and language arts classes are 1.5 periods long. So a teacher at another grade cannot teach a 5th grade ILA or math class unless they have 2 periods open in their schedule, which none of them will. So we'd have to be doing a little shifting around where we are currently departmentalized. If you look at without the new teacher, Mr. Donnelly and Ms. Steves would have to pick up a language arts and a math class because they can do that. And the off-level teachers would be teaching a section of 5th grade. So for example, the current, I have it as the 8th grade and the 7th grade science teachers would be teaching a 5th grade science class. And the social studies teachers from 2 of the upper grades would be teaching a social studies class. Where it gets complicated, if we look at the drawbacks of the version, is that those teachers would not be able to meet daily. The social studies and science teachers from the different grade levels would not have common planning time. We hope that we would still allow that, like, for example, that 8th grade science teacher to still meet with the 8th grade team, but that may not be able to happen either. It depends. So it's not even just about the 5th grade team. It could have an impact across the other grade levels. Hopefully we would have less there, but the 5th grade team definitely would not be as cohesive. I might have a child who has, 2 of the core teachers in 5th grade, but might have 2 that are off grade level. It's just more difficult communication wise and working together so that the curriculum is the same. Advisory would be taught by people off grade level as opposed to people within their grade level.
I just want to chime in also, Darlene, if I may, because you
absolutely
did a really good job there. What Darlene and I talked about earlier, and this is important because perception is everything. So we would have perhaps an 8th grade teacher who teaches and is in the 8th grade mindset, right? Because our grade levels are children change so much at this age. So I'm used to teaching 8th graders. I teach them 4 out of my 5 periods a day. And then suddenly I'm thrust into a 5th grade classroom. I don't have that mindset. I'm a good teacher. I'm certified. I can do it. But, and then we have, for example, we have an 8th grade science teacher teaching against Mr. Donnelly, right? And by against, I mean, so you know how our parents are, and rightly so. Oh, so what were they doing in Mr. Donnelly's class? What are they doing in Mr. Iwani's class? It's very different. It's disruptive. And because Mr. Donnelly and Mr. Iwaniki, if he would be the one, do not have time to plan, it'll be a catch as catch can thing. So we just want to be clear that it's not simply a matter of numbers. You can't just divide up the number of students we have by the number of teachers, because frankly, we're going to have the same population next year, right? We're going to lose a big grade, we're going to gain a big grade. So our total enrollment is not going up. So if you just divide us up, it doesn't look like we justify to have an additional staff member. But when you look at how it plays out, it's going to make a big difference. So I just want to put that out for the board's consideration. And thank you again, Darlene, for doing that.
Sorry, the current 5th is about 80 some odd, and the incoming 5th would be approaching 100.
Yes.
Thank you.
I know that one of the questions that has come up would be, like, currently the next year 6th, 7th, and 8th grade teachers would have 4 sections of their subject, and what would they be doing on those other periods? We had talked about some of those teachers would have the +1 classes that we currently have, or similar classes, but also some additional support for the students, based upon this year that need math or reading intervention. The current teacher, the specialists cannot accommodate all the, there's additional kids this year who are needing support. And this would allow us to have some teachers to assist in some of that work as well.
So when I look at the enrollment, there's 93 4th graders right now.
Mm-hmm.
So assuming that number carries over roughly at 93, it breaks 5 ways at 18.6 and 4 ways at 23.25. So I assume then it's the position of the administration that 23.25 is too large for the 5th grade?
Yes.
Is it simply a question of it being too large, or is it a question of the scheduling?
Really, if we put them into 4 sections, could we schedule them? Yes, the classes would be large. And Natalie really could probably speak more to this particular 4th grade, as we don't know them yet.
Right. Okay. So if we decided that that we could live with 23 kids in a class, you would not need to have the 8th grade teachers teaching the 5th grade. It's not necessary.
Correct.
It'd run the same schedule as this year, just the classes would be larger.
Got it.
Basically.
Yes.
And this is all predicated on the expectation that we're all in agreement that a period and a half of ILA and a period and a half of math is appropriate for 5th grade, because that's part of what throws this all off, because the 5th grade teacher is only getting 4 assignments.
Minimally, that's correct. Yep.
And bring me up to speed if you can in 15 seconds. That decision of a period and a half per fifth grader is based on what?
They're still elementary. They have a lot more contact time with their ILA and math teachers in fourth grade. I mean, elementary students typically have double that time, the equivalent of 2 periods. So we're kind of skirting that a little bit already. They're 1.5. It's just, they do reading and writing in ILA. It's very time consuming. It's absolutely a minimum amount of time. We wouldn't I'd rather put more children in a period and a half than to try to just take down that. It's not appropriate.
And looking to line up with I know for math, we've talked about trying to line up with other fifth grade classes and what it looks like. And like a 45-minute period is not long enough. The math programs, many of them are at least an hour long. That's what they're, we're purchasing the program and they say you need an hour a day. So we want to make sure we're providing that.
So to put it another way, if RES were a K through 5, this wouldn't even be a question.
In terms of timing, no, they would.
We'd have 5 teachers.
Schedule, correct.
Right, but I'm talking about the period and a half question wouldn't even be there.
No.
For fifth graders.
Schedule their time differently.
Okay.
Right. If it were K5, we'd probably just be saying that there are 5 sections of fourth grade. There'll be 5 sections of fifth grade.
Right.
Can I ask a question? It's Colleen. I'm still having a block. I'm not understanding where the +1 went. So what I thought was last year we agreed to a staffing level to maintain teams, even though the current fifth grade was small. So now next year, the incoming fifth grade will not be small. So can't we just release the +1 to have coverage? Am I oversimplifying?
That's where the science and social studies teachers coming down to teach a fifth grade class would be.
Yeah. I mean, it does fit. The numbers fit, but it's very disruptive to the program, and you're going to have 2 different people teaching on very different grade levels and to students who have very different needs. Of course, it can be done. If I had my preference, I'd rather up the class sizes, and I know my teachers are probably thinking, no, don't say that. They're young and they're needy, and they need a lot more attention, and classes that size are big. But I'd rather see that than just have 2 different teachers from different grade levels teaching the same class.
And I should know this because I have a fifth grader, but the +1 was not within the fifth grade.
Correct.
Okay. That's
yes, 7, 6 and 7. Yeah.
Got it.
If we rewind to the prior iteration of how fifth grade operated at John Reed, we were running on a 2-teacher team model where the students were getting blocks that were ILA and social studies and math and science. And that allowed the flexibility to be a little bit more elementary with respect to the flexing of ILA and math. Is reverting to that on the table?
If we reverted to that, we'd still have the same issue with the numbers where they are.
We don't have enough people.
And if we had a 5th person, they would have to teach all 4 subjects to their group, much more like with RES. They would have 1 teacher for the whole day.
But again, you could have the teams like it used to be with just the larger classes. That would be an option.
Yeah.
Right. And then instead of having a period and a half, they'd have blocks, whether they're 2 periods or 2. I don't know how the blocks align to the current periods and minutes, but you'd have that block of time to flex in and out of the amount of math and ILA to meet the needs.
Yes, and when the teachers did that, for the most part, if they had 2.5 periods, they did divide it so that it was about, it was more of math or ILA and less of science or social studies each day.
Which is, there are pros and cons to. Are there other ways to, if we feel that the class size is uncomfortably large, are there other ways to push in supports besides running a 5th section and creating this additional position? Whether it's paras or interventionists or other things that can float and help as needed.
We would need paras. We have 1 math and 1 language arts para that serves the whole school. We do not have any other paraprofessionals in our building, except for the special ed ones who are assigned to special ed
Right.
department.
I'm thinking if you created paras to float in 5th grade, you could provide a way to maintain 4 teachers on the team. You'd increase the class size, which provide additional support that pushed in where it needed to without having to create the new certified position.
We would need what, 2 at least? 2 additional?
You tell me.
We'd have to work.
Yeah,
that
I'm not sure. I mean, there's 4 sections of students, so it depends on how often they had a para with them.
Right.
How much of the recommendation that 23.5 is too large is based on COVID, and how much of it is based on COVID, how much of it based on this particular cohort, and how much of it is based on general unwillingness to go that high?
It's just on the cusp. I mean, our traditional middle school class should be between 17 and 22, but they're elementary. I really would like to defer to my colleague Natalie. She knows the grade better. I don't necessarily have elementary expertise in terms of optimal class sizes. I do know at the middle level, when kids are a little bit older and they need a little less, individual attention, you'd be okay with 22, 23. But my sense is when I walk into a 5th grade classroom, the teaching is more intense. It's more one-on-one. It's more hand-holding. It's just part of what we do. It's an elementary focus. I don't know. Can we hear from Natalie? I mean, we weren't necessarily prepared to talk, specifically tonight about this, but I would like to hear what she has to say about this particular cohort, and why we went to 5 sections already, in 4th grade, and how she thinks that might translate into 4, I should say, once they got to 5th grade.
Well, first of all, my connection is bad, so I apologize if I'm freezing and doing all sorts of things. We should blame this on yesterday, not now. So yeah, I am a proponent for small class sizes. I like Phyllis mentioned, I think it allows the educators to really individualize and personalize that instruction, as we share as a district that we do and do well. Not necessarily speaking for certain cohorts, but if you recall, the cohort that Phyllis has right now with 4 educators in 5th grade, we only had 3. And we did have 23 and 24 in a class that year. And it was incredibly challenging. Again, going back to what she said, that ability to really, our teachers did a fantastic job, but to really meet the needs of all the kids individually. So again, I too wasn't prepared to talk about numbers at Phyllis's school, but this particular cohort, the 5 classes have absolutely worked beautifully for us. And I even think sans COVID, I think even just if this was a typical year, I'd be really pleased having the numbers of 18 and 19 per class at the 4th grade level before they transition up to the middle school. So that's what I can speak about. What we have currently, the 5 has worked beautifully for us, and we're grateful for that.
I remember the 3 sections. I lived it.
Yes, you did, Colleen. That is correct.
Other questions from the board on the 5th grade scheduling or staffing question?
Okay, so I'm on board. I understand the need and the plan. So, we're going to really have to take a really hard look to see what we can do without in other areas to make this happen. We have to find a way. If this is what our students need, we have to find a way to make it work. So I guess this is just like a heads up that, we're really going to need as much info as we can and perspective on what we could possibly do without to make it happen.
Can I ask what's more beneficial, this 5th grade teacher or a music teacher?
We knew that was coming.
You knew that was coming.
That one too. Drax, I thought you weren't going to ask tonight. We can make such a strong case. in both areas. I mean, we are desperately in need of a more enriched music program, a more comprehensive music program. I really do believe our students suffer with the JRMS experience as they go through. You know, we have a great music teacher, but he's one individual, and we, you know, we're not doing general music. Kids are, you know, their lessons are multi-graded. There's just, you can make a really strong case for a 1.0, you know, music teacher. I mean, we've talked about maybe should we ask for a 0.5 fifth grade teacher and a 0.5 music teacher. It really limits whom you can hire. You're not going to get as many qualified applicants, but you know, if it has to go strictly by the numbers, that's something we'd like the board to consider as well. But it's a great question, John, and we need them both, but obviously we have to prioritize.
And don't get any ideas, Dr. Harrison. I see the.
Yeah,
That was an audition yesterday.
Phyllis and I have already talked about it.
is there such a thing? Did we already ask this? Is there such a thing as a fifth grade music music teacher that can teach fifth grade? Is that a ridiculous question?
If you believe in unicorns and Pegasus.
Okay.
There could be a certified music teacher out there with elementary certification. I mean, we could try. Be creative.
I think John's question starts to bring into focus really the largest tension in this discussion over the next few weeks, which is how do we support the needs of students in core academic areas coming off of a 1.5 year long disruption to their education, while also making school not purely work, in as much as it is entirely math and reading and writing focused. How do we maintain the education of the whole child through the arts and through the other programs that we hold dear that make kids want to get out of bed and come to school every day? And it's a struggle, and we're going to have to make decisions as to whether or not we accept 23 or 24 kids in a class in order to have a more robust music program, or accept a less robust music program for yet another year in order to help bring the whole cohort of fourth graders through at a more appropriate class size. And I think this is one of many similar questions, as we're going to be looking for hundreds of thousands of dollars to pull out of this budget, and it's not going to be a painless process. But I appreciate, Darlene and Phyllis, the context on this. I'm sure it'll continue to be a topic of conversation, but this is helpful to understand the different ways that we can solve for 93 new students coming to the building.
Thank you.
Are there any lingering questions from any board members tonight on budget areas or areas that they want to make sure they hear more on or talk about? Because I'd like to reserve Thursday primarily to start getting Dr. Harrison's understanding of areas to pull back out. And also we'll have a little bit more detail from Clarence, and we'll have some more time with the most recent budget document to work through there. But if there are no other major topics tonight, I would be content to leave the budget conversation here for tonight, with the exception of asking my colleagues if there are any other areas they definitely want additional information on, so the administration can go back and do some research.
It's Colleen. Could we have a model of how the custodians were were last year, are this year, and how you propose them to be next year, so I can really understand how the work was shared amongst our custodial staff. You know, my instinct is that we need custodians, and I just need to follow the narrative of how these changes impacted our staffing.
Colin, I think I'm gonna have to defer to both Phyllis and Natalie, because you're talking about some things that I'm not privy to since I wasn't here. So I think you're talking about how they're utilizing them within the building. Is that correct?
yes, this is a question for the universe. I don't know who's going to answer this question. It could be my board could, pull me aside and be like, don't you remember? And I'm just not remembering. But I just want to be very clear about what we're proposing to do.
Again, I will try to talk, Joe. I'm going to ask if I start getting wobbly, my thing just keeps coming on and saying unstable, that Joe will pick up where I leave off. So since I started, there was a lead head custodian straddled between John Reed Middle School and Reading Elementary School. He took care of primarily the maintenance and facilities. So when we had issues with the boiler, when we had a leak in a classroom, when the roof pulled up, the list goes on. He would be between the two schools working on primarily those things. And he would come in and he was the overall leader to both day custodian at RES and at John Reed, and the night teams at both schools. This year, that position no longer exists. And what we have now is a day custodian, or AKA a head custodian, who's doing that job in our building. And then Phyllis and Darlene have that position in their building. So we each have our own person now, but that own person is doing not only the facilities and the maintenance, but also managing and helping to work with and lead the night crew, and also doing all the cleaning and calls during the day. So again, when there's an accident in one classroom down at the other end of the building, and then they have cafeteria time where they're cleaning up in between the lunch waves, and then something happens where a bathroom door gets locked in the second grade wing, and then coming back to check in at the main office to then call because we need someone to come for the alarm system to check something, and then they go back to the cafeteria. So it's really everything. And that individual works the same hours as our former day custodians, if that makes sense. So again, the person who was straddling both schools and doing the maintenance and facilities at both schools, that's no longer a position. That fizzled, and we now each have our own person, not only doing the maintenance and facilities, but also in charge of the daily cleaning, the daily operations in the building, and managing the night crew. At night, we have a total of 4 people. But what we did this year, because of COVID, we found it was very important to have someone. So we did do some shifting of schedules. We didn't change our people, but we did shifting of schedules so that we could have someone join our individuals at each build. And Phyllis, I believe you did this too, where you adjusted a nighttime schedule to be in the day.
We have actually the part-timer that we share with you.
Okay. So what we did is we took one of our night people and we shifted that person to help with the lunch waves so that we could, again, have our head custodian be free to be doing other things throughout the building. Additionally, the person who comes in also goes through the building and does, as we have in our reopening plan, that the bathrooms throughout the building and the high-touch areas will be cleaned twice a day. So he comes through during the day with our little magic sprayer and other cleaning supplies and goes through the building to do that, while our head custodian is managing the cafeteria and the building. And then we have our night crew finishing up and locking up, cleaning up and sanitizing and locking up the building at night. So that's kind of how it's changed over time, which is why our head custodian came in this year, and we work with a company that helps us take a look at the layout of the building, the square feet in the building, the number of people you have on, and it gives recommendations based on the needs in the building. The recommendations came back with a number far higher than we are putting out there. We are asking in the next year's budget for one additional person to support the enormity of the building, so that our day custodian our head custodian during the day can do what needs to be done. And I know many of you know who have walked the building with us, a building that was built in 48, 57, and 72. Things need a fixing pretty much on a daily basis. I don't believe that there's a day that goes by where we're not having to figure out something. I think I told you guys the silly little story about the office bathroom a couple weeks ago. And just 2 weeks ago, then the fluorescent light bulb goes out, and you can't get fluorescent light bulbs in an overnight package. So, it's just constant. It's always something that's going on that needs a fix in a building of our age. So that is the reason why at RES we put in that additional person, because as Phyllis mentioned, due to this additional need this year, Phyllis and I in our buildings are sharing an individual. So we each get an individual for a couple of hours. That individual is helping to support my night crew because, again, as I mentioned, I moved one of the night people today because I realized in our reopening plan, I can't have our head custodian doing the cleaning of the bathrooms twice a day and the cafeteria and everything else. So with that shift, we were able to bring in a substitute that Phyllis's building and our building are sharing for a couple hours each day. He starts the night process of the night cleaning, and then he leaves, and then the night crew starts with him and then finishes after he leaves. So he's just there at each of our buildings for a few hours. So I don't know if that lays it out a little bit more clearly, but
yeah, so
I think that was Arlene's question.
The impact is that we got rid of the previous head lead maintenance and facilities person. So when you talk about, you have your day custodian, you have your one night custodian shifted today to share with JRMS and RES. How many are left for the night crew?
So just a correction. So I took I put one of my night people on a pseudo day night shift. So he comes in later than my head custodian.
Okay.
And leaves earlier than my night crew. So he is a night crew person, but I shifted his hours with his agreement so that he could support my head custodian during the day.
Okay.
And then the person you're referencing is someone completely separate who Phyllis and I share. She gets hours during cafeteria. I get the beginning of the night shift hours to support the now smaller team at night because I've made that shift of that person from 11 to 7, if that makes sense.
And I'm so sorry, how many are left on the night?
3 individuals at night.
Okay. Okay, so then there's also a temp shared RES, JRMS. Okay, I think I got it for tonight. I don't know, I'll hold on to it.
Thank you, Colleen. Any other areas of inquiry from board members, either for instant answers or for researched answers? Then to signpost a little bit, I think for Thursday, one of our primary objectives is going to be to start talking about what can come back out of the budget request. On Monday, the 8th, there'll be a tri-board meeting to bottom out on the central office budget allocation. My understanding is between now and then, the Region 9 board will be holding a special meeting to discuss the Director of Digital Learning and Technology. And then our next scheduled meeting right now is for March 2nd. At that point, the central office issue will have been resolved, and we will be in a position to possibly vote on the budget. That would be the goal, to resolve it on March 2nd. I assume the outside possibility would be having to add a meeting on March 4th, depending on how productive we are on Thursday. So if there's no other requests for information, we can leave the budget topic for this evening and move on to item 8, district administrative reports. And we can start with Ms. Del Conte.
I'm actually going to be very brief. I really just want to spend a little bit of time talking about preschool. That's usually not a topic that I usually include in, but preschool is an integral part of the special services program. As you know, preschool really is a way for us to provide special education support to our 3- and 4-year-olds, but yet exposing them to typical peers. This is also the time where we do our preschool lottery, and we were able to fill our 3 and 4-year-old classes. So we actually, at this point, do have a waiting list. We have to keep a couple of spaces, for our birth to 3 kids that are coming in, but we actually do have a little bit of a waiting list. So we've actually have sent out our notices to those families who have, put their name into the lottery. And we're actually doing something a little bit different this year. We're actually inviting those parents to join us for a Zoom session, to get to know our preschool teachers before they make their first payment. So next week we will be doing a Q&A with our preschool teachers because we can host tours. Ideally we'd like them to have a tour, but we thought the next best thing would be is to have preschool families come and ask questions of our preschool teachers. So those are really the highlights that I really just wanted to emphasize this month, is that in the other areas, we're pretty stable. We're getting ready for transition meetings. Our 4th graders moving up to John Reed, and then from our John Reed moving on to Joe Barlow. So this is the time of year where we start talking about transition planning. So we are in the middle of that as well.
Are you surprised that there's a wait list for the preschool, and is that a testament to new families moving into town?
I think it's a little bit of everything. Our preschool really is word of mouth. We ask families, how do you know about our preschool? And it's usually, my neighbor had a child in the preschool program. There are a few new names because of families that have moved in. Typically, we do have a small wait list, so it is not unusual for us to have that wait list.
Thank you, Jen. Any questions on special services?
Just, Jen, any extra care, as I reflect back on having a little one so small and the prospect of sending her into a school when things are so uncertain, I really have so much empathy for families who are parenting little ones through this is a very trying time. So any, in addition to everything else you do, any extra effort that can be dedicated towards communication and touching base with parents, as they have their name in the lottery and as they're selected and as the program might have to adapt over time because of the pandemic. I just really think if it's possible, I think it would be welcomed amongst the families with the little ones.
I am working very closely with the preschool team. One of the things that we did do this year, based on feedback from parents, we did post, the lottery, how the lottery works. There seems to be a lot of mystery around the lottery. So this year we actually posted on the preschool website, what is the lottery? How did the lottery work and how is priority given? We are working hard this year to try to update our preschool handbook. So in fact, the preschool teachers have been using some time to really try to create an up-to-date handbook. So we're hoping to have that within the next couple of weeks or so, that we will be able to share that with the community. That's all part of our communication effort to update the handbook and to make sure that it truly reflects, what we're able to provide for our students.
Wonderful, thank you.
Other questions for Jen? All right. Thank you, Jen. Clarence?
So first, apologies, we don't have a budget object summary report for you. With our new account code changes, our vendor had to recreate the report, but given they haven't finished it yet with all the account code changes, so we didn't want to give you something to look totally crazy. So once they get that demo, we'll supply it to you. Chris, can you share the transfer report on the screen so I can?
Yes, just give me a moment.
And while he's doing that, we haven't got our numbers from Brown & Brown for the health report yet. So once those come in, it's being the beginning of the month, it's sort of hard to get, they haven't finalized the January numbers yet, but once I have that, I will share them also. Chris, could you blow that up just a little bit? please. Perfect, thank you. We had some substantial transfers, most of the large dollar amounts regarding to lawn care. As I talked previously about the previous head custodian at RES used to do the grass cutting. He retired. They outsourced it via contract. So this is just putting money in those accounts to make sure we can pay it. Come this spring, I will let the board know that I met with the first selectman last week and her team to discuss the town taking over that potentiality. We're investigating that possibility. That nothing's been resolved as yet. We walked the grounds at RES on Friday, I believe. It was bitterly cold, so we weren't out there too long. But we did note the sort of magnitude of the job, and we had a discussion with Natalie about what hours are available, given that we don't want anyone cutting grass when the kids are outside. So there's a finite block of time in which to do this. So Julie and her team and I talked about what our options would be and how we could do that, whether it be someone from the town staff or continue to outsource it, part-times, whatever. They're just trying to figure out what's the best way to do it, see if we can save some money. That discussion, I think, will probably continue for another few weeks, and then we'll hopefully have a resolution. Excuse me. So you see two of those transfers related to lawn care. And then the other one is for software. I'm not sure what the software one was, but it's basically we're taking from accounts that we had some availability, mainly because of some COVID-related availability. So those transfers were put through just last month, actually at the end of the month, so just last week, actually. So that's, if there's any questions on those, I hope to be able to answer them.
Just getting used to this new format, the budget units, is there a way to decode that? I assume the 23s and 24s are RES and John Reed.
The budget units, that's basically the function code. So that 01, no, our function code 01 will be the account. So that's the fund. The 23 is the location.
Yeah.
And then you have the function code, and then the object code's 112. So 01 would be our general fund, 23 would be our location, and then the 2600, it would be the function code.
It's just all put together.
Yes, I wasn't here when they designed this format, so we maybe have a discussion about making it a little clearer, but this is what which we had designed originally. We may want to break that out, because I understand it took me a while to figure out what that number meant myself, and then we realized, oh, that's just they've mashed all our numbers together.
Right. The 23s and 24s were a good clue, but other than that. Chris?
Yeah. So the transfers to the lawn care, I think I understood you to say that those were prospective. In other words, you're preparing for spring.
My understanding is we signed a contract to do the lawn care that was signed post your budget being approved last year. So you've got to have money in the accounts in order to pay for the lawn service that's coming up. Natalie and Phyllis, you can correct me if I'm wrong about that, but my understanding, those contracts were signed after the budget was approved.
But it's a prospective transfer.
Yes, correct.
Right. But okay. So it's conceivable that the actual number won't be the 4,200 or the 7,800.
Well, the contract was based on a certain number of cuts, I think once a week or something. So they based on the number of days throughout the summer is how they did it. But I can pull up the contract to confirm that, Chris.
Okay, so it's based on what the contract requires.
Yes, it's based on what the contract calls for.
Through June 30.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. All right.
Other questions on the transfers? Other questions for Clarence?
Thank you.
Thank you, Clarence. I just had a quick budget question that popped into my mind. We have not bottomed out on the cost of the new math curriculum yet, I don't believe. That remains a placeholder in the budget document.
Correct. Stephanie's been having discussions with the vendor. They were not quite understanding our request, so we just sort of preemptively said, well, how about if we pay you X for this period, X and Y for this period, and Z for this period? Will that be acceptable to you? So that's what we're waiting to hear back from them.
Right. So we can just start dictating our own terms to them.
At this point, yeah, because they weren't quite understanding what we were trying to say to them. So just so you know, Chris, we propose to pay $20,000 this fiscal year, and then equal amounts July 1 about in the next 2 years.
But I think what's helpful for the board to know is the 80,000 that's in the budget is going to be high, and we're going to be able to take something off of that.
Correct.
You're doing them a favor. They think you're pulling a fast one.
Other district administrator reports. Dr. Harrison, anything tonight?
No, I mean, I could be brief. I just wanted to say a huge thank you to our families and our staff for their flexibility with the snow days. With yesterday, of course, being a traditional snow day, I'm sure that was an easy transition to make. But with jumping right back in today into remote learning. So thanks to our staff for that. And wanted to just point out our COVID health data right now. That we are at 19 new cases per day over a 14-day average per 100,000 population, which is a long way to say that is very good. And we have not been that low in Reading in a very long time. And so I'm very encouraged by that. It's a little higher in Easton, but together in Easton and Reading, we're at 25. And so I just want to encourage our community to make sure that they are continuing to follow all of the mitigation strategies and just making wise choices. We are reminded on a daily basis that the choices that happen within the community and for families at home have direct impact on what's happening in our classrooms. And, you know, one of the first messages that I sent out at the start of this school year was our staff and administration have worked really hard to open schools. Now it's on us as a community to keep them open. And so we're back at that place now where it's really important. And more than ever, just want to stress the importance of communication so that we're hearing from our families as quickly as we can when there's an exposure or when there's a potential exposure because of a positive case in the household. So just those pieces, but really wanted to take a moment and just celebrate sort of where we are with our COVID data. This is not to say that we are not remaining very vigilant, continuing our meetings weekly at the state level, but then also with our local health officials and very much watching closely what's happening with any new strains. And following that and following the guidance from the Department of Public Health. So that's all I have for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Harrison. Does anybody have any questions for the superintendent? All right, move on to Board of Ed committee reports.
I have one. So our task force on diversity, equity, and inclusion met. And just real briefly, we discussed how we were going to do an assessment of our strengths and weaknesses. And after a lot of great discussion and collaboration, we have a working group that will be meeting to create surveys that would go out to the community, broad community, the students, alumni, staff, parents, and they would have the option to be returned anonymously. And then also the option to participate in a future focus group. And on that working group, we have students, parents, and board members. So it was very positive.
Thank you, Heather. Mike Hoffman wasn't able to make it tonight, but I do know that the facilities committee is continuing to work on the capital plan and review of our capital needs to make an ultimate presentation on those needs. I know Mike D'Agostino is here, who's been a longtime chair of the facilities committee. I don't know if he'd like to comment.
Mr. Chair, before you do, we were supposed to meet today, but I, part of the storm, lost my cable, so I couldn't get on a Zoom call this morning, so we weren't able to do that. So Mike wants to add anything beyond that. We were supposed to meet this morning at 7:30, but woke up and found my cable wasn't working.
Yeah, so I guess, as you said, Chris, we continue to look at the needs of the buildings and formalize a capital plan for you. So we should have something for you shortly.
Thank you, Mike and Clarence. Any other committee reports? All right. Public comment. Anybody wishes, please raise your hand in the participants window or otherwise make yourself known. I see Sarah Odell.
Hi, Sarah Odell at 214 Blackrock. So just before I start with the other things I wanted to say, I just wanted to say that I know that we had some discussion at tonight's meeting about the small groups for cohort C. And I just wanted to say, as somebody who spent some time in cohort C over the last couple of weeks, the lack of small groups and time that teachers are able to give to them we're able to give for our teachers to do small groups has been a huge surprise to me as somebody who had my kids in regular school up until this point. It is something I would really encourage the school administrators and our leadership to investigate making time for this. It is really hard for these kids to learn without that small group interaction and just like a connection with their teacher, a human connection. It's a really important thing, and I really think it needs to be emphasized. So just as we move forward toward the final budget and we're going through this process, I just wanted to advocate for a close look at what's going to be needed in the next phase after the pandemic is over and we're back to semi-normal situations. I mean, a lot of kids have needed to remain in cohort C, or kids who just haven't thrived in the high change, sometimes remote, sometimes distance learning, sometimes, and also like even when they're in person, just physically distant teaching that needs to happen to keep our staff safe. And a lot of kids haven't thrived with that, especially the younger kids. So there's going to be a lot of ground to make up. And so I really want to advocate for us to remember and to communicate to our community that it's important to have small class sizes, especially for our youngest learning, with added capacity for differentiated learning more than ever. I have a kindergarten student, and I mean, going forward, I have concerns about the social and emotional and school behavior stuff, as well as big pieces of just literacy and math foundation that I know are important in first grade because I also have an older child. I would love to see a push from our Board of Ed, and hopefully it would be something our teachers and staff would support, to do a summer program for some of these kindergarten kids or some of these other, younger grades that have really missed out on both foundational things that they need to move forward educationally, but also just like recapturing liking school, recapturing connecting with their peers. So I think that's a really good thing to think about as we're moving forward, and just to advocate for adjusting the staffing levels to meet those needs when we can. Additionally, I heard the discussion about the fifth grade, which I also have a student who will be going into fifth grade at JRMS, and just like our fourth graders are suffering as well from this the distance learning and the changes and just a high change environment. And thinking about 23 students in a classroom in a new school where some of the kids will be remote for most of the year just seems like a really scary prospect. And I'd really like to encourage, just again, at every level, and I'm sure it's true even for Barlow kids too, that this is such a tough time for these kids. And the staff has always been our most precious resource, and their know-how and ability. And if we can do everything we can to make sure these kids are in class sizes that are right for getting them back into a love of school and meeting their best, getting the most success they can out of school, I really hope that that's what we'll prioritize. I know you guys are working really hard to get there, and we appreciate it. So really want to advocate for that. Thank you so much. I know you guys are working on it.
Thank you, Sarah. Carolyn? Carolyn?
Can you hear me?
Barely.
Let me try something.
There we go.
I think it'll be a complete failure of this district and this town for our children if we end up with larger class sizes. I echo exactly what Sarah said. These kids are suffering. I think about that fifth huge transition, and to put them in those large class sizes is going to be completely remiss. I think it's going to be a massive failure, and I would highly advocate against doing that. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. Angela?
Hi, guys. Hi, I'll do video tonight because you guys are always wondering if I'm even on video anymore. Hi, Angela Kayas, Deer Hill Road. I've just a couple of things that are all over the place, so I'll go quickly point to point. First of all, Dr. Harrison, just personal fan, rocked the video, made us all smile in Reading. Thank you so much for bringing a little joy to the craziness. I also want to compliment the teachers. You know, we have come so far. Today was a very quick switch to remote, and it worked really, really well. My kid literally got up, knew what they had to do, got through the whole day. It worked really well. And to think about where we were and where we've come to, I just want to compliment that it's a real win for our district. I'm sure there's more work to be done, but I have to say it's a super A+. So just thank you to all the staff and all the efforts that continue to be put through. And to that end, we all got report cards today. Holler, opened that one really quickly and read the comments first. Mrs. Hammond, Principal Hammond, I promise I did. But I do think that one of the things that I want to echo is those programs that offer advanced learning for students, and my daughter happens to benefit from that in 3rd grade, has helped her through COVID in unbelievable ways. You know, we are far advanced moving into fractions and comprehension and themes and chapter books and all sorts of things because we had those differentiated opportunities. And so I know you have to look at the budget. I know it is really tough, but I can't stress enough that we have to keep challenge programs like Gifted and Talented running. As I really think, again, to that class side, those small groups were able to push my kid through and really help her thrive, which she's doing. I have just a question in terms of COVID relief funds. I listened to the legislatures as they gave some positive news about President Biden and what potential funding may be coming to Connecticut, which I know is a great unknown at this point. However, I would hope that at some point we could press our legislators to figure out how much money Reading could get and whether or not that might allow us to have any budget relief to get additional staffing to help with exactly what Sarah was mentioning, or potentially what JRMS needs, which is extra staffing at the earlier grades. So I just don't know. I realize that staffing is a long-term solution and this sort of funding is a short-term funding. However, we do have a short-term and a long-term problem coming together very quickly in the 21-22 season. So I just had a quick question on that. And then finally, just a big shout out to preschool. I have an incoming kindergartner next year. And so I really want to say that I applaud their efforts to have more communication and open communication. I think it's one of those amazing schools that has had such little good communication that it like takes away from something so great. That if you can shore up people understanding, especially those parents coming in with little ones, that what their kid will expect, what they can expect, how great the education will be, it'll go a lot further. And I do think you will get a lot more people on that wait list when you do so, but that's also a good thing, so people know how great it is. Other than that, thanks for hanging in there, everybody. It's budget season, so best wishes. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. Kristen?
Hi, Chris. Thank you. Kristen Amstead, 60 Wordleberry Road. I would also like to echo the need for smaller classes. My son was with Colleen's daughter last year when a budget cut took the 4th grade class down to 23 and 24 students per room. There was 3 sections and it was not great. I'm going to say that. And my son happens to, he was with Mr. Farina last year. So he was able to leave those larger classrooms and go to Matthew's room for both math and language arts. So it created a smaller room and a better individualized type instruction for him for those 2 sections. But for the other children that were left in those larger rooms, it was more difficult. And going from 4th grade to 5th grade is a very, very big jump. there are a lot more pressures put on these children. There is a lot more just them learning to have to learn a schedule of 9 classes, different days, change here, where I'm going, how it's going to go. And we lose gifted and talented in the middle school. And as a parent with a child, it's, he's fallen through the gaps a bit because there aren't those extra opportunities there that we enjoyed at the elementary school. And it brings me to my other topic, which is the open choice program. And I'm hoping that the board will be transparent in the pros and cons of this program. That my understanding currently right now, and I'm hoping that somebody at some point will correct me if I'm wrong, that we in Reading pay roughly $23,000 per pupil, that with open choice, the state will reimburse anywhere between $3,000 and $8,000 per pupil for out-of-district students, and they'll cover sped and busing. But that leaves a shortfall between roughly $15,000 to $20,000 per pupil. And I'd like to understand that a bit more, because as a resident that lives in this town for almost 5 years, year after year after year, I've been watching programs be cut. I've been watching, the music and the janitors and all of these things. Gifted and Talented is on the chopping block every single year. Gifted and Talented was put on the chopping block at JRMS. It's gone, and I'm pretty sure it will never come back. So as a parent who has children at both RES as well as JRMS, the open choice, I really feel that it behooves you to make sure that you're very transparent with taxpayers, that you tell us exactly what this means, what the pros and cons are for our district, what the fiscal responsibility we will be per student. Because if I am right, that there is a between $15,000 and $20,000 gap per student, I look at that and I go, for 5 out-of-district students, you could give me a gifted and talented teacher at JRMS. You could bring music back. We could have another janitor. We could make sure that Matthew Farina doesn't lose his job and he continues to support all of those students at the elementary school. So I really, really, really am hopeful that the board will explain open choice better to us and will tell us the nitty gritty of exactly what it's going to cost us and what our benefit will be. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. Danny Garavito.
Hi guys, Danny Garavito, 51 Ledgewood Road, Reading. I just want to say that we've had so many new families move into town. We've had some more established residents move out, jumping into the ability to sell their house and move on to different places. But I would like us to please take a very conscientious look as we move closer to spring and we get into the budget season of actually voting, that the board come together to really get facts out there to people who may not be coming to these meetings on a regular basis, to truly understand what our budget is, so that we can let people understand where we're coming from and what Reading is all about, which is representing our kids and doing the best that we can for our kids, and making a solid effort to make sure that everyone's on the same page and we don't have a repeat, of 2 years ago where it came down to 1 vote. And that's all I'm asking. Thank you.
Thank you. Danny, Pina Jabari.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you, because I know this is never an easy process, and I know how much work you all put into this. So I appreciate you and being so diligent and thoughtful. The thing, I echo a lot of what my, fellow sort of Reading colleagues here have mentioned. And the thing that stands out to me, there was an NPR report, I think it was just issued yesterday, that said on average, children across this country are 5 to 9 months behind. And that's really almost an entire school year. So as we think about condensing the number of teachers and increasing class sizes, that does worry me a bit as a parent, because I do fear that we have so much to catch up on from a learning perspective. But beyond the learning perspective, which all the other parents and community members have also touched on, I think we also need to face the reality that we're not going to be done with COVID over the next school year. We are still going to be 3 and 6 feet apart and masked. It's children are not even eligible at this point to receive a vaccination. And we have no idea when that will be possible. So from a physical distance standpoint, I think we also have to take that into consideration in trying to cram 23 students into one of those very small classrooms actually might be a physical challenge that I think we need to also consider their health and safety in this decision-making process. So if there's anything, I think investing in our children's education and asking the Board of Finance for the maximum possible this year to me feels like one of those years that we really, we have every justification for needing more investment in these children and to make up the loss, to take care of their health and safety and well-being and so forth and so on. So thank you. And I'm sorry, I forgot to mention I'm on Wood Road. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public comment? Seeing none, board member comment? Seeing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to
Heather,
adjourn.
is there a second?
I'll second that.
John, it was Heather's motion, John seconded. If there's any objection, hearing